There's a new stud in town. What'd you hear about him? Well, they said that he's big and strong and good looking.
Gotta get your act together.
Harder, stronger.
Hairy, sweaty, macho.
Real physical strength. He'll never stop.
Hello. Welcome to a very special episode. Back in the 80s, all of the most popular, all of my favorite TV shows, they had very special episodes. Like once a season. And it was like usually R-word, sexual, rape, or sexual assault, or some type of attack on a child, or racism. Not so much though in the 80s, a little bit more in the 90s. But that's what this is. This is a very special episode. You know why? Because it's the Work in Progress podcast, and I'm going to tell you how to get more progress so you don't waste your fucking time. I'm Michael D. Catherwood. All right. I was talking with my man Louie today when I was training, and you got to understand there's a lot of yes and no and if and or but when it comes to debates and the fitness industry, and specifically with kind of aesthetic fitness or bodybuilding fitness, physique stuff. But with the advancements in technology, they've really come to realize mechanical tension is the sole creator of hypertrophy or muscle retention or muscle growth. So you're looking to create more mechanical tension in the trained muscle. I love the fact that technology has been able to kind of narrow these things down and give us a little bit more clarity. What I don't like is that people then take that knowledge and then they distort it and fuck it all up. Mechanical tension has been isolated as the kind of true driver of hypertrophy, muscle retention. That does not mean that weight or resistance is the only factor that goes into it. There's a couple other ones that are pretty darn important. Number one is stability. If you're looking to think about your stability, if it's up in the air, if it's vague, you're not going to be able to create as much tension in the muscles that you want to train as you would be. So make sure that stability is the number one thing that is going on when you're engaging in resistance training. Stability of the thoracic area along the spine and then in the hips. Once that's really, really humming, your stability is top notch, then you are able to create a higher level, a much more focused level of mechanical tension in the muscles that you want to train. That is why things like physical therapy, things like certain athletic endeavor training, stuff like that you see online that looks kind of wacky, the functional patterns, a lot of that stuff, a lot of the Bosu ball training and the instability training, not at all useful for being jacked. Not at all. In fact, it is quite dumb. If you're injuring, you're an older person that's looking to walk better or rehab a hip injury, or you're someone rehabbing certain injuries and you're looking to train stabilization muscles, I understand there's value to it. When it comes to performing better and looking better, instability is not something that you want to have as part of your training. The other factor that a lot of people overlook that is very important is the distance from the moment arm, or the distance away from the joint that you're training through. And that makes a big difference, okay? Let's say you're doing a squat, okay? You're doing a goblet squat, you're holding it right close here. Your joints at the hips and at your knees are the ones that are going through that movement. If you put the weight far away from your body, it will change the distance away from the joints that are being trained. And it will have a huge impact on how you're able to create tension in those muscle cells, okay? That is why there is such a profound difference between a high bar back squat and a low bar back squat. You are going to bias the hips with a lower bar back squat, okay? Because you're changing the angle or the distance from those moment arms. You're gonna get a lot more weight up because there's better leverage. Okay, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to create a lot more tension in the muscles that you want to make look different. I see a lot of young women who get their information mostly from TikTok, and then they go to the gym, and I see them doing kind of glute exercises. And because of the distortions in the distance from the resistance to the area that they're trying to train or put the motion through, they're not getting very much out of it. And sure enough, almost every time I see these girls doing that, and a lot of them are working hard, but they're not working correctly, and they have pancake ass. Okay, so distance from the moment arm is an important factor. Another one is speed of the reps. Okay, you're going to be able to create different levels of tension if you slow things down. Now, I'm not saying that it is definitely better for you. You will create more tension and you should always slow things down. No, but it is different. It is going to affect the outcome of how you contract the muscle cells that you're intending to train. So think of speed as another factor. And there are other ways, you can find other ways of resistance. For instance, accommodating resistance, or things that are going to have different levels of resistance at different points in the rep. Like a resistance band. Okay, if I do a curl with a resistance band and it's underneath my foot on the other end, at the top it's going to be incredibly higher levels of resistance because the band is getting more stretched out. When it's less stretched out and close to the bottom, so it's going to be higher levels of resistance at different points of the range of motion. These are all things you got to take into consideration. So speed, and then the profile of the resistance. The next one I want to focus on, and a lot of people overlook it, they just think like heavier weight, that gives me more resistance. Technically true, but they overlook direction of applied force, or direction of applied resistance. Here's the thing. A dumbbell, a barbell, they can only apply force down. The heavier the weight, the more gravity, the more resistance, but it applies down, right? You lie back on your back and you do a bench press. Up and down. You're fighting that resistance. You're doing an incline press, still straight up in the air, right? Overhead press, a row, okay? The resistance is going down towards the ground. That is, heavier things create more force towards the ground. That is the way it goes. So cables, bands, things like that give you the ability to change the angle at which you're receiving the resistance. That is the path or the angle of the applied resistance. And that can only be up and down for barbells and dumbbells because they're heavy. That is what they do. But just keep that in mind. If you're moving barbells and dumbbells through lateral planes, it's not necessarily giving you increased tension or increased resistance because it's not going in its path of intended resistance. That's why cables and bands and things like that become valuable. Okay. The more that you kind of groove that intended resistance pattern or resistance profile, the higher the amount of tension you're going to be able to create. And finally, let's talk about weight. Okay. If stability is there, if you have got the proper distance from the moment arm, if you have the initiation, kind of top-down training as we talked about, there's the quality and all the factors, and you've gotten to understand the profile of the resistance and the actual angles that it's coming from. Once you get there, you're going to be able to create more tension with higher amounts of weight. But do not confuse burn with tension. You can do a lot of things where you create a big burn or a great pump, but you're not creating much mechanical tension. And that is why a lot of people get so confused, because they're like, I've never had such a hard workout. The other day I did my squats and I did blah, 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 and I did 15, 20, 30, 40 reps. And if you just start counting reps, you are going to lose sight of the fact that there is an actual measurable, quantifiable quality factor. Okay, and you have to qualify before you can quantify. What does that mean? You can't just start to add more weight and more reps thinking that something's good, because if you add more weight and more reps and you're not understanding what you're doing, every single set and every single rep tends to be different, and then you're stuck just wasting energy. So you have to qualify before you quantify. There needs to be the quality of reps and an understanding of the last rep of the last set that I did is very similar to the third rep of this set that I'm just about to do, okay? That's where you can then start to quantify and add things up. Don't be a dick. Like, subscribe. You will learn stuff. I will make your life better. Thank you. This is the fuck's the name of the show? Work in Progress podcast with me, Michael D. Catherwood. All right.